It happened that morning. The successful country candidate in Chao family learned the news quickly, and as soon as he heard that the revolutionaries had entered the town that night, he immediately wound his pigtail up on his head and went out first thing to call on the imitation foreign devil in the Qian family, with whom he had never been on good terms before. Because this was a time for all to work for reforms, they had a very pleasant talk, and on the spot became comrades who saw eye to eye and pledged themselves to become revolutionaries. After racking their brains for some time, they remembered that in the convent of quiet self-improvement there was an imperial tablet inscribed, "Long live the Emperor," which had to be done away with at once. Thereupon they lost no time in going to the convent to carry out the revolutionary activities. Because the old nun tried to stop them and put in a few words, they considered her as a Manchu government official and knocked her on the head many times with a stick and with their knuckles. The nun, pulling herself together after they had gone, made an inspection. Naturally, the imperial tablet had been smashed into fragments on the ground, and the valuable censer before the shrine of the goddess of mercy had also disappeared. Ah Q only learned of this later. He deeply regretted having been asleep at the time and resented the fact that they had not come to call him. Then he said to himself, "Maybe they still don't know I have joined the revolutionaries." That's from the novella The Story of AQ, written by our subject today, Luke Zun. Hello and welcome back to the library. Before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to introduce my guest today, the Book Mac Daddy himself, Noah MacGillvray. How's it going?
Yay.
Yeah. All right, Noah, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little dreary because of the common cold going around. But how are you doing? How's everything going?
Life's chugging along,
Yeah,
as it does, coming out of the winter in Vermont here, so.
Yeah, I can see something that's called sunshine outside. It's very rare.
I don't know what that is right now. I have to recalibrate after a few months of no sunshine. So.
I know we don't produce energy through photosynthesis, but I gotta swear to God, as soon as the sun comes out, there are more people doing ridiculous shit outside every single time. Yeah, if you ever live in a place that has sun about a third of the year, you understand what I'm talking about. Now, Noah, how much do you know about the Opium Wars?
The Opium Wars, they sounds like it was a thing that happened about a drug that exists.
Now, that's pretty accurate.
Yes.
What do you know about Jesus' little brother, Hong Xiuquan?
Jesus' little brother, Hong Xiuquan. I don't think I've ever heard about Jesus' little brother, Hong
Have you ever
Xiuquan.
heard of the May 4th uprising?
Yeah, may the 4th be with you.
Honestly, Noah, I knew diddly shit about most of this and a lot of these topics before finding a tiny novella and pamphlet of this guy's writing in a little free library about a year and a half ago. And I think you're a great person for this episode because a lot of the names and themes are going to sound exactly like it's straight out of Star Wars. So I'm happy that you got that there.
Sweet.
Yeah. So going into it, on the 25th of September, my wife's birthday, in the year of 1881, a boy named Zhou Zhangshou was born in the city of Shaoxing, which is in the Zhejiang province. I'm just going to say, guys, I don't speak Chinese or Mandarin or Manchu or anything of that sort, so sorry, I'm going to be butchering names. The city of Shaoxing is not far from Shanghai, to put it in a more simplified perspective for us. From my reading, it was culturally common to use several names before the 20th century in this part of the world, so Zhou would take a couple of courtesy names, as they're called, one being Yushan, when he reached adulthood, which he later changed to Yucan or Yucai. Courtesy names are just markers of adulthood when men reach the age of 20, historically speaking, and hold formal and respectful purposes. He also took the name Shuren, which translates literally to be an educated man, which we'll get to, when he started the Jiangnan Naval Academy. Again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We won't refer to him any other way other than Lu Xun, okay?
Lu Xun.
Lu Xun.
Lu
L-U
Xun.
space X-U-N. Pretty much because, honestly, this Num Deplore is the easiest way to pronounce him, and it's his most famous name. He started taking this name when he was 37, when he wrote his most famous book, Diary of a Madman. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. This won't even be the only pen name that he uses. Like, Zhou Shuren is another one, but again, for simplicity's sake, Lu Xun, or Lu, as we're going to call him, and he's best well known internationally. In order to know Lu, we should talk a little bit more about China, particularly, of course, the province or the area he grew up in, and the more contemporary history around it, because we're not going back several thousand years here to talk about that kind of history.
Whoa.
Because when you think about history of China, it literally is incomprehensible to a Western American mind. Fair enough, right?
Sure.
Yeah, this comes with a massive disclaimer, again, being that we're not experts, nor even novices, of Far Eastern or Chinese history.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, calling it Chinese history is also inaccurate in general, too, right? It's like multiple different dynasties. They don't even call themselves the country of China. It's just a Western name for it, but whatever. This is what I thought was important to include in a single episode narrative on this influential author. So here it goes. Here goes nothing. The Zhejiang province rests in southeastern China, near some of the most densely populated areas of the region, which is saying something. Settlement goes back to roughly 6,000 to 5,000 BC, or before the Common Era, or before Christ decided to bless us with the BC area, which is rather incomprehensible again. Jumping ahead up until the 18th or 19th centuries after death, and roughly, it's not after death, I know, and roughly a century before Zhou Zhangshou was born, or Lu Xun, the areas we now know as the Republic of China, the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong Special Administration Region of the People's Republic of China, Mongols, and parts of other present-day nations was under the rule of the Qing dynasty. Now, the Qing, spelled Qing, for those who don't know, will be important in his early life, and kind of important all of his life, really. We really can't minimize its history here in saying that it was a dynasty that began its rule way back in the 1636 AD. So by the time Lu was born, it was already 250 years old. Literally the same age as the U.S. of motherfucking A's today. So we might be having a Lu Xun born anytime soon.
So the history of this country is way, I don't know, it happens even before Christ is born. Is that even a thing?
Yeah, no. Apparently, it happened before
the world existed.
The world existed in 4004 BC, according to some religious zealots. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. One of the most insane things. No, it's all right though. I also learned from one of the more reputable zoos I've ever been to that humans were alive at the same time as dinosaurs and actually rode them as if they were horses. So it's got to be true. It was in a museum zoo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park in real life.
The 19th and early 20th centuries are a distinctly chaotic and turbulent time for the Qing dynasty and those who lived in what we consider present-day China, specifically in the region where Lu was born and raised. Example of this are the First and Second Opium Wars that occurred before Lu was born, which were fought between the Qing dynasty in England and also France and kind of a little bit of America between the first and second ones. And it was all written for the right to open up Chinese ports to foreign trade, which means that this was literally a trade war. Right? Yeah. You get that specific reference of the prequels.
Yeah. They want to open it up so they can trade.
Yes. Nothing. We as Americans don't know anything about trade wars that are currently happening to this day. No. Get this, Noah. With a specific desire for the French and the English specifically, they wanted to import opium into China.
The French and the English wanted to import opium into China?
More the English than the French.
Okay.
Mostly just the English. The French just wanted other shit. But yes, that was the reason why they're called the Opium Wars, was because the English imported opium to get the Chinese hooked. Yeah. And addicted. Whoa. And extract any type of good at ridiculously unfair rates to the Chinese people under the Qing dynasty, with the addiction serving as a perpetual source of income to the traders. Again, as Americans, we have never experienced any type of opioid flooding into communities by conniving means that created a small class of addicted citizens in perpetual need of what was once their prescribed medicine that turned into a life-destroying need to get high. And that company still isn't trying to sell those addicted substances and also the medication that fights the urge to feel those cravings. Purdue Pharma, of course, one of the biggest cunts of all history, does not do that. I opine, because they do, that the whole family and anybody who sold medicine, knowing that it destroys lives, should probably be in the Hague for crimes against humanity, but, like, that's just one man's opinion. I don't know. They're still giving out money to fucking some sort of ballet, which I guess Timothée Chalamet was right about one thing. Anyway, the other important event that we should talk about that occurred between the First and Second Opium War was something called the Taiping Rebellion. This is the first of a number of rebellions we must talk about, but a very short summary of the rebellion was caused by a man named Hong Xiuquan. Hong was Han Chinese, specifically from the Hakka sub-ethnic group. No, not that Hakka. That was heavily suppressed by the Manchu Chinese, who were in a higher position of power in the government at the time. Not like this isn't something that's happening in China or the U.S. and motherfucking A right now. There are a lot of different ethnic groups within China, just generally speaking, right?
Like, it is a very large place.
It is with billions of people, literally.
Yes.
You may know this, but Eastern countries back then and to this day have very difficult tests that can potentially set you up with a government position for the rest of your life and make you a very successful person. This still happens, again, like to this very day, and was even more important back then. And the premise of this is to enable a meritocracy, quote unquote, but functionally there was a shit ton of nepotism back then. There are a lot of ways that you can do it today still, and connections in your ethnic background were just as likely to get you a position than acing an exam. Hong's whole family helped fund him to study for his administrative exam with whatever means that they had, for probably because they were very poor. And this wasn't just out of the goodness of their hearts. If he passed, they would lift up the whole family, right? These exams are considered to be probably the hardest civil service exams to ever be constructed. It literally required memorization of Confucian texts, like from the Confucius Bibles, whatever, the writings. There's no Bibles there, but writings. And the passing rate was in the single digits of these exams.
Wow.
Yeah. I know, right? Confucianism, side note here, was the main school of thought in China when Lu was alive, and it would change when he was also alive. Legitimately for hundreds, if not thousands of years at that point. So it's a big fucking deal here, right?
No pressure.
No. Back to our narrative a little bit. Hong failed his exams, which was normal for the first time. But after failing multiple times, he had a mental breakdown where he had visions that led him to ultimately believe that he was literally the little brother of Jesus Christ, making him also the son of God, which caused a 14-year civil war casualty in part of China where Lu was around and all the areas around him as well 20 years before he was born, right? Like, that's kind of crazy, right? That's like, imagine 20 years before we were born in the 70s. That, we're talking about like the end of Vietnam, so of course it impacted him. Hong and his followers effectively had their own theocratic monarchy administrative state within Qing China. It's difficult to estimate how many people died during the Taiping Rebellion, which could be really summarily and poorly described as a religious civil war. But it's estimated at a very low end between 4 to 8 million, but probably closer to 20 to 30 million people died during this rebellion, which is roughly comparable to all of World War II or World War the sequel. I know. It's crazy. And to be clear, this wasn't the only rebellion occurring in China, even in that general direct location at the same time. And then the Second Opium War happened after the same general area. So, yeah, lots of turmoil is occurring. I think it just to categorize that within the Qing dynasty in general in the 19th century and the 20th century was fucking turbulent, right? So Lu, for his part, was born into a Han family who at his birth was declining in status. His paternal grandfather was in fact appointed into the Imperial Hanlin Academy in Beijing, which is one of the highest places as an aspiring civil servant can be. And remember from Han Christ himself that being a civil servant in China, then and now, is one of the most prestigious careers you can have. Both his parents were from landed gentry. Women were not educated in China at the time, but something that I wanted to note is that the mother was self-educated in the sense that she learned how to read or write. And Lu Xun is actually Xun itself. That last name is his mother's surname. So he took his mother's surname, I think, kind of as just a nod to her intellect. His father, on the other hand, was a bit of a fuck up. His name was
probably why he took his mother's maiden name.
Yeah, Zhao Boyi had passed the exams we mentioned, so his road to success should have been paved with, I don't know, meritocratic gold, but it was revealed that he tried to bribe an examination official, which is par for the core, but he got caught, right?
It's only bad if you get caught.
Yeah. It wasn't necessarily uncommon at the time. It wasn't necessarily common, but it was also not necessarily uncommon. Then and now, in the U.S. of motherfucking A, there are plenty of wealthy students that get accepted into elite academies due to bribes. Or, sorry, donations. That's what I meant.
Yes.
My bad. Of course, this was massively disgraceful for the whole family. A clear example of this is that... Oh, sorry, Davis is calling me. Fuck off, Davis. I'll keep that in there. Mr. Vernacular Spectacular having to get his way into this one.
He sneaks his way right in.
Yes. Ugh, gross.
Ew.
Yeah. A clear example of why it was disgraceful was that Lu's grandfather was implicated in the bribe and was sentenced to beheading. The sentencing was commuted, and he would be released from jail 18 years later. Jesus. For Lu's father's part, he would never be able to take the exams ever again. He was stripped of any government appointment. So, like, Lu's dad is fucked.
Whoa. So all this for bribing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Lu took to heavy... Well, I think one thing I need to mention here, and I didn't in the script, is that the Han ethnic group was not the majority ethnic group that ran the... Not majority necessarily. I think they were actually the majority in terms of population, but the one that was not in charge of the government. That was the Manchu with the Qing. So, like, being a Han already had... You kind of had a step below than anybody on Manchu. Just a little bit of context here. So it's more difficult. So I think if you were Manchu, you wouldn't have 18 years or beheading for bribing.
Yeah, that's even today. That seems a little extreme. But back then, that seems a little extreme.
It's definitely extreme.
I guess it's who you know, not what you know.
Yeah. So Lu's father took to heavy drinking and opium use, like the whole wars thing. He ended up dying at the age of 35. Lu Xun was only 5 years old at the time. So now the civil service exams have multiple different levels, right? And the first district level one occurred for Lu around the age of 7. So these things are just a series of fucking, I don't know, traumatizing like kids from the age of 7. I don't know. We have fucking exams like that in this country, but it's not like as stressful. Definitely.
No one gets beheaded if you try to bribe the kneecap, the kneecap provider. I don't even think they do that anymore.
No. So Lu didn't take these very seriously because he's 7 years old. He didn't like Confucian education, because he's 7 years old, and would end up studying at a tuition-free military school that specialized in Western education eventually. This brought further disgrace. So, like, later on when he ended up getting an education. And his mother asked him to change his name to avoid that disgrace being associated with her and the family. Crazy. He ended up taking another exam and attended the School of Mines and Railways, which brings credence to the phrase that the youth yearns for the mines.
Youth yearns for the mines.
This school exposed him to foreign literature, studying both English and German, and reading foreign works to him, such as the American classic Uncle Tom's Cabin, which studying foreign works was rather rare for Chinese education at the time, and only really was a thing because of the Opium Wars, kind of, sort of, not really, but kind of. One of the things that opened up the ports, opened with the ports, was the influence of Western education, Western influence, yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this will be good. This will be good for your country to open up your ports.
Yeah, sure, it could be. Yeah.
It'll be good.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it definitely will be. There was definitely a few years there where it was really bad for China. I don't know. When Nixon opened up China to the United States, it was good temporarily. There's also a reason why Detroit isn't where its heyday anymore, and Flint doesn't have drinking water. He also experienced racism from the Manchu students. Remember being that he was Han. So him reading Uncle Tom's Cabin and finding inspiration would make a lot more sense to listeners right now, right? He graduates from the mining school in 1902 and leaves for Japan to study medicine to pursue medical education. He actually got a scholarship for this. He attended the Kobun Institute where, like anybody else who was exposed to a new culture, began practicing in culture and shift some of his views. Example of this is he did jiu-jitsu, and he also cut off his queue, which is the word for a hairstyle men in China were required to wear at that point. It's that hairstyle with the long top, so it's like in a bow and a shaved on the sides. You'd see this in stereotypes of Chinese men,
For sure, I had this hairstyle when I was a younger lad.
Yeah. This
man bun.
In the early 20th century, he experienced anti-Chinese racism while in Japan. Basically anywhere you would experience that in the 20th century. And this could be said basically any nation at the time, right? Liu wrote very little when he was in Japan, actually, but nothing of serious note. And this, by writing, he wouldn't do like his own personal. We'll get to some of the stuff that he worked on in Japan in a second. Liu Xun was attending medical school when something called the Russo-Japanese War started. We are not going to dive into this too much because it's way too off tangent. Let's summarize this by saying that Japan absolutely annihilated Russia's navy, causing one of the most embarrassing defeats in basically all of the 20th century warfare. Naval warfare specifically. What's important for us is that a lot of this war was fought on Chinese soil, and one of the ways that news spread was through the usage of something called lantern slides. They're effectively the early image and slide projector technology that you saw, like slide projector. Did you have slide projectors when you were a kid?
Yes, I did. You would bring the projector out, and then the teacher would shuffle through pictures and project it onto the screen, like chalkboard.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think they have that anymore with just modern technology. But, that was a thing for us, for sure. We're kind of at the tail end there. So they would show these still images, right? They weren't like moving pictures. Liu attended a showing and witnessed a scene where a Chinese national was executed brutally by Chinese soldiers for allegedly being a spy for the Russians, which, never happened. Japanese soldier never allegedly executed people because Japanese people never did it allegedly, blah, 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 blah. There was never any significant event called the Rape of Nanking. Look it up. Of course there was. Japanese are pretty crazy about repressing their own war crimes themselves, as any nation is wont to do. Fellow Japanese students looked at this scene in complete apathy, just totally numb. This event influenced Liu Xun to quit his medical studies, leaving abruptly. He convinced the Chinese embassy to switch his studies from the medical school to the German Institute, where he began studying the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, it's unclear to me when this happened chronologically, but while in Japan, he also translated some of the works of Jules Verne, particularly 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and his early writings were a lot of translations of very famous stuff that you would know. Now, Somehow, while he was studying in Japan, though, his mother heard a rumor she did not like. She heard that he got himself hitched to a Japanese girl. To spare them from this embarrassment, she faked an ailment and asked him to come back home. While he was back home, he was forced to participate in his own arranged marriage with a woman named Zhou An. In fact, his mom had arranged this marriage years before. This relationship wouldn't be considered romantic, but the honor-bound Liu would take care of his wife and her material needs for the rest of her life. I mean, just a little bit more Chinese culture here at the time. Zhou An was one of the people who were forced to have her foot bound and through those ceremonies. I don't know if you've ever seen photos of foot binding. It is
not fun.
Yeah, no.
Talk about foot problems.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like you're not able to walk when you're older.
Yeah.
Straight up. Yeah. A few days after they were hitched, Liu went back to Japan with his brother, Zhou Zhangshou, leaving his wife behind. While in Japan this time, the brothers would translate Western texts to literary Chinese, but this endeavor wasn't fruitfully economic. For one reason, they lived in an area of Tokyo that didn't really have a lot of Chinese population. The second is that literary Chinese is very difficult for the ordinary Chinese person to read. So they didn't really have a market for their work. So what they ended up doing was completing a book of Western fiction into a compilation called Tales from Abroad, printing 1,500 copies. You want to know how many actually sold? Take a wild guess.
10.
A little bit more than that.
Damn it. All right, 300.
41 in total.
All right.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
The brothers returned home flat broke, and Liu started teaching to make ends meet. Liu would start drinking heavily, which was a habit that he would have for the rest of his life, and he was also a lifelong smoker, a heavy smoker. He also wrote his first story called Nostalgia, but he quickly felt disappointed in the effort, and he threw it away. His brother, Zhao, however, saved it and would later publish it under his own name. That's what brothers do. Wasn't published under Liu Zhang. It was published under Zhao Zharen. Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. Yep. Now we've reached the point of the story where it is the year of 1911, and shit's about to pop off right the fuck off in China with the Xinhai Revolution, or simply the 1911 Revolution for our Western minds. This is a pretty complicated series of events that took decades to culminate prior, and we cannot and do not have the time to delve into it too much, but a coalition of underground resistance groups led by the unified, I'm going to butcher the shit out of this name, Tang Menghui, or Unified League, and the leader Sun Yat-sen led a series of uprisings and occupations of rebel forces all throughout major cities in the last quarter of 1911.
It sounded good.
Yeah, I like rebel forces, I think, usually. That's calendar year, not fiscal year, last quarter. This led to the imperial edict of the abdication of the Qing emperor, ending a 267-year dynasty and a 2-millennia-long imperial rule of China under a monarchy, which is nuts, right? That is some history right there. Side note here, it was only a population of over 500 million people at the time. It only took 100,000 active rebels. There are about 500,000 members, but most weren't active fighters, to overthrow a staunchly conservative government that refused any reforms and only served the wealthies and those who were institutionalized best interests. So, just saying that out there. When the Tangmenghua was originally established, 90% of its members were between the ages of 17 and 26. So it was a youth rebellion for sure.
Well,
any questions so far?
The rebels said, enough's enough. Wow, we could take some notes.
Not doing this right now for any particular reason. Cough, cough, hint, hint. For our sake, this is I can't find if Liu was an active participant in the overthrowing of the Qing dynasty. My understanding, he wasn't. He was in a pretty rough patch in his life. This is when back to Japan to get his brother to help him financially because more and more ancestral land had to be sold off. What we know is that he was given a new post with the new Ministry of Education through a fellow Chinese national he befriended while living in Japan. This was with the new government, right? He first moves to Nanjing, then to Beijing, where he would live for the next 14 years, right? So one of the early assignments was to design the state emblem of the Republic of China, and then which would for a couple of years be the Empire of China and go back to the Republic of China, whatever. He completed with other notable writers, right? This assignment. This national emblem is called the 12 Symbols and was adopted from 1913 to 1926 and was heavily influenced by the 12 ornaments, which are ancient Chinese symbols and designs, right? So he like just was nobody and actually designed one of the most important it was the state emblem of the Republic of China. So after it was born, so I guess he just kind of got lucky there. He also worked in a committee responsible for censorship, which let's not even forget a little bit. We're discussing, though we're discussing a relaxing of liberal thoughts with a new government, we're still talking China, right? This is not the U.S. of motherfucking A. Particularly, the grand old pedophile party hasn't been hardcore into both covering up horrible sex crimes.
What the fuck?
But they're also on a hardcore censorship and book banning spree. Just Google the images of dumpsters full of books and universities within the state of Florida that are currently happening as we speak. It's I just wanted to do a whole episode on book banning specifically in Florida, but they have banned so many books at this point that like. I would struggle to like literally read all those books within a lifetime. So it's
so they're getting rid of it's like Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, they're literally throwing them out of libraries.
And like knowledge is just being thrown away.
Yeah. So Florida.
Whoa.
It's I don't know. It's really difficult to describe Florida for a non-American. It's just Florida.
It's its own place.
Yeah. Anyway, from my understanding, the censorship committee that Liu Xun was part of was very ineffectual, partially because the new government didn't have the same control of publication that the Jing dynasty, also because it seems like the efforts were half-hearted. He began his lifelong career on collecting folk stories and publishing books of ancient Chinese authors that brought many authors that were somewhat forgotten back into the mainstream. This is one of his greatest achievements in his life and something that he would do for the rest of his life, basically. He's published and somewhat popularized, though I don't think it's really the correct term. I think make it more available to modern audiences, right? These ancient Chinese folk stories, poems, and other texts. So in 1917, he was invited by a friend to write for a new magazine called New Youth. New Youth would become a highly influential publication, particularly to the adequately named New Culture Movement, which was a youth movement, or youthment, as I'm going to say, that arose after the fall of the Qing dynasty and the growing disillusionment of the Republic of China due to their inability to confront many of the same issues that were widespread in China that was the cause of the overthrowing of the Qing dynasty, right? One of the key points of the socio-political movement was to form a new culture formed by modern ideas and a mass political participation. So, before people were not allowed to just participate in politics, there were just a handful of people making decisions. Now, do you have any questions before we go on? Because I know I've been spouting a lot, and now we're at the New Youth Movement. So,
I did a little bit of research on this guy, and I feel like this is where some of his writing is gonna take place.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct.
I think this is where it kind of takes a turning point for this guy here.
Yep. So New Youth, the publication, published many of the thinkers of this movement, right? It was the first literary magazine to publish works in a vernacular Chinese or spoken Chinese when it published a story called One Day by an author named Chen Hengzhi. Chen is a fascinating person herself, being one of the first of 10 women to study overseas on government scholarships attending American universities like Vassar College and University of Chicago, and then becoming a professor of Western history at Peking University, which is cool and why we should still open our universities up to foreign students, guys. Don't be dicks. I don't have any time to read this story. Didn't have any time to read the story because I was busy reading the second story ever published in vernacular Chinese. And that's Lu Xun's Diary of a Madman, published on the 2nd of April, 1918. This was the first short story Lu Xun published under this name, right? Lu Xun, which we mentioned before.
Yes, and this is the one.
Yeah. The Diary of a Madman, the title, I've also read A Madman's Diary, but whatever, is actually taken from a different short story, like the title itself, by the famous Russian writer Nikolai Gogol, which Lu Xun would translate a lot of his works to Chinese as well. Now, this is a very short story, and I'm going to summarize it and spoil it a bunch here because there really is no way not to spoil it without discussing it. But the story's premise is that a man went to visit two brothers he hadn't seen in a long time after hearing one was sick. He received a diary from one of the brothers, and the diary was, of the other brothers, right? So one of the brother had a diary of the other one, and his friend gave it to his friend, right? The main character. Here, within the diary, it said that he described this brother's illness as, quote, he had suffered from a form of persecution complex, unquote. Not anything that we're dealing with right now with a bunch of people in politics with a crazy persecution complex. That persecution complex really was a form of paranoia in my view. And as the brother convinces himself that people are eating other human beings in a village that he's living, then he realized that everybody is on the whole cannibalism thing. Specifically, the older brother, who also he convinces himself that, when he became the leader of the house after their sister died, he chopped her up and fed the entire family parts of his sister without him knowing, including the other brother. The last entry of the diary are just these two sentences. Quote, perhaps there are still children who have not eaten men. Save the children. Ellipses, unquote. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, right? This whole work was a revolutionary in its use of imagery, symbolism, vernacular literary Chinese, which was called Baihua. Bahao. I'm sorry, guys. Baihua is how you spell it. One of the clear goals to publish in a form of writing accessible to the common person is for the common person to read it, right? And in that, New Youth was successful. This story was highly influential and successful to the people of the movement from the moment of its publication. Here I'm going to cheat a little bit and say I simply copy and pasted the next segment from the Wikipedia article, which is longer than the actual story itself, that describes why it was so influential, because for those who aren't Chinese literary history scholars, this was probably the most succinct paragraph I could find about this. So, quote, Lu Xun's use of imagery, symbolism, and metaphor serves as a symbolic interpretation for his contempt for Chinese traditional values and thoughts. The Diary of a Madman can therefore be interpreted as a revolutionary call to action to reform the traditional belief system of Chinese society and bring Chinese values more in line with modern contemporary ones. The story is not just a depiction of a man suffering from mental illness with the delusion of being eaten, but rather a symbol of the cannibalistic nature of Chinese customs and society wrapped up in the veneer of Confucianism. The metaphor of eating people symbolizes the oppressive and feudalistic social structure and values entrenched within Chinese culture. The madman represents the awakened individual who regains his individuality and refuses to abide by the traditional and harmful cultural norms of society, with the neighbors who he believes to want to devour him, representing Chinese society in general. The story also emphasizes how the madman is imprisoned both in his home and trapped psychologically in his mind, symbolizing Chinese society's inability to escape its backwards traditional and feudalistic roots, unquote. It was like 5 pages long. I read it online. You can all read this online. So, any questions so far?
No.
Yeah.
Just kind of bewildered.
It's pretty hardcore, I would say, the cannibalistic aspect of it.
Yeah, that is. I did not know that was wrapped up because I just did a basic Google search of this guy and did not know that was part of the work.
Arguably his most important story ever. That's what he's known for. So,
yeah.
As the new culture movement progressed, it helped influence and build another political movement with many of the same goals of building a new culture. This movement, also influenced by the New Youth publication and Liu Xun directly, was called the May 4th movement. We made it here, right? This movement, again, is incredibly complicated and insufferable nowadays because everybody tells you May the 4th be with you on May the 4th, 5-4. Just kidding. And is a result of a number of factors we discussed already. Stuff we haven't talked about is that it comes from protests after students gathered in Tiananmen Square, where nothing ever bad ever happened, to protest the weak response from the Chinese government to the Treaty of Versailles. Do you know anything about the Treaty of Versailles? Does this sound familiar to you at all?
Treaty of Versailles, something to do with the French.
You're right.
Yes, the Treaty of Versailles, and it's like a ceasefire, right?
Yes, almost precisely. That's one of the things. Congratulations. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I'm happy for you. I'm not trying to be condescending. That's actually...
No, I know. It was between, what was it, French and European? No, but...
it is European.
It is European. I'm French and the British.
Look, when two guys walk into a bathroom, they both come in there as Americans, but once they're in the bathroom by the stall, European. Okay, that was so dumb. Okay. The Treaty of Versailles was the treaty that ended World War, the prequel, so the First World War.
Yes.
So there's that ceasefire, right? Why is a treaty that ended a war largely fought in Europe important here? That's the question, right? Well, Imperial Japan were part of that war, and they were allowed to retain territories once occupied by the Germans. This movement saw many things, but we can't talk about them. What's important is that it's widely known for its cultural shifts in China and subsequently the spread of thought that was bubbling under the surface but hadn't fully boiled over. Something that you may be known as communism. Liu Xun's prominence expanded when he began to publish political writings in New Youth, and we will talk about his influence in due time in the script when those things shaped the current government of China. So there's why he's one of the most famous people in the world. So any questions about why or anything of that sort? Like, no?
No.
My daughter started making crazy noises with her mouth. It goes...
So were you just mimicking her?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of how the development works. I know. Anybody with a kid who's got like that age, it's just like, you understand.
Kind of absorb things they teach you, and they absorb things you teach them.
Yeah.
Whether it be noises or
Chinese communist thought.
Yeah.
In 1929, Liu Xun published the first part of a series that would become the novella called The True Story of A.Q. Not a true story, but a work of fiction, True Story of A.Q. would be translated and become internationally renowned. So much so that Liu Xun was considered for the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1927, 6 years later, even despite the fact that it was written in something translated loosely as peasant dirt Chinese, not my words, something he said himself, and the translation of this text was known to be abysmally poor. Liu Xun rejected even the concept of being nominated, and this would be one of the last works of fiction he would ever write. He would write one more work. We won't chat about it. It's not that important. I also read this novella. This is the one I read that I found in a little free library, and it's also like what we started with, the big quote. It's highly allegorical, again, with full of symbolism revolving honor and how people are supposed to act within Chinese society, and obviously how people are reacting to things like the revolutions and reformations that we've discussed as well. AQ being an example of just an absolutely intolerable piece of shit. The True Story of AQ and The Diary of a Madman would be the two most influential works of fiction Lu Xun would write, right? And probably arguably the two most influential works you've ever written. They're very accessible, easy. I mean, the book itself is like tiny. It's really small. It's like
a short read.
Yeah, it's a short read.
Read.
But we are going to head of ourselves a little bit here in 1927 because several important life events happened between the original publication and the translation of The True Story of AQ. One of which is he lost his front teeth in a rickshaw accident, which sucks, but you can live with that. The following year, however, he developed tuberculosis, which is a lot more difficult to live with.
Yes.
Lu Xun began working at Beijing Women's College in 1925. At the Women's College, he met a student named Zhu Guangping. The two would start an affair. And when Lu Xun found a new job as the head of Chinese literature department at Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou, his first act was to hire Zhu Guangping as a personal assistant.
Very good.
The two would be together for the rest of their lives. And when Zhu Guangping got pregnant with their son, Lu Xun was probably pretty anxious to tell his wife, Zuan. Zuan, for her part, was reportedly pretty excited about their announcement, realistically. They didn't have a good marriage in the traditional sense, and there's been a lot of hints to say that they weren't actually... They had like a loveless, like non-physical marriage.
They were bros. They're not loving each other.
No, it's definitely a marriage at this point of honor and convenience. But I don't think, you could divorce back then. Like, it was super rare, so that's what we're having here. So, and from here on in, basically, he's got his side chick, which is his main chick. He's got his wife, which is not his main chick; it's his side chick.
That's his side chick.
Yeah, it's a very complicated thing going on here.
It's like up is down and down is up.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, where's up?
Oh, golly.
Lu Xun began to identify as a Marxist by the year 1930, and he would begin aligning himself with the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, which is the same party that is currently in charge of China today. He was one of the co-founders of the League of Left-Wing Writers and would spend much of his later life writing political essays. And in China, outside of the two stories we spoke, that is really what he's known for the most. I didn't read anything politically based by him, mostly because I don't read political theory much at all, anymore. I've read things like, the Communist Manifesto, because it's really easy, and I have a lot of issues with it myself. The best things that you can get is like the 10 points of the Communist Manifesto. But whatever. I don't read much theory because,
Yeah, me neither.
If I was going supposed to interpret it, some things as allegorical or fictional, then I'll simply fucking read fiction. You know what I mean? I hold more left to center left views in the global sense, which makes me a radical leftist, according to the fearmongers. They think that I'm supposed to be a dissenting voice that is going to be held for treason some of these days, apparently, and not those who stole and uploaded your social security numbers to private corporations through AI models because of some wacko, small-dicked, impotent billionaire liked a meme in a fucking fake coin called Doge, and destroyed countless lives because of it. That guy is a traitor. And in my living memory, I also personally find communism incompatible with democracy as somebody whose parents escaped a communist country and have eyes and have seen how democratic and freedom metrics in communist nations just don't exist as much as other ones. Not to say that capitalism is great. It's not. It's pretty fucking awful when we're talking about economic systems that abuses any form of democracy or republicanism in order for infinitesimal, malicious class to suck whatever the fuck they want and dictate as value from the masses. Both are capitalism is objectively ruining the planet through climate change. Communism isn't doing that great either. So, hey, what am I going to say other than both of them are rapacious? Again, All you need is eyes in a second grade education, comprehension, critical thinking to know that the U.S. of motherfucking A is also in a tough place. But I digress.
Yeah.
It's time to kill off our nascent communist. For by the time of 1936, Liu Xun's health began to deteriorate. You know, it might have been him getting TB, might have been his long-term smoking, probably some other old-timey diseases.
Maybe the fact that he couldn't eat an apple without his 2 front teeth.
Doctor said that he should have an apple a day.
1 a day.
And he couldn't do it.
He couldn't break through that hard outer skin.
Applesauce was not invented yet. Neither was apple juice. By the early half of the 20th century, this shit didn't mix well for a long life. His tuberculosis became chronic, and breathing became increasingly difficult as bronchial asthma and fever was frequent. He had to once drain 300 grams of liquid from his lungs through just one puncture, which is... that's a lot of fucking liquid.
Yeah, that's a lot of grams of weed. I don't know. I don't know the metric system like that, even though I deal with it sometimes.
I have no idea.
Well, I know there's 16 ounces to a pound. I don't know how many grams that is.
Yeah.
That's a few. That has to be a couple pounds. 300 grams?
That's got to be a lot. We'll figure it out. I'm sure that somebody's listening, and a lot of people in Spain listen to this podcast, which I'm happy about. What I don't know, it's like great. So,
that's awesome. Well, maybe somebody in Spain can phone us in and say how many pounds is 300 grams.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
That'd be great.
But you got to send it in Catalonian. Oh man, I probably just lost my 3 Mandarin, my 3 Madrid listeners.
Sorry.
If you live in the Basque Country, I'm sorry too. But hey, at least you've got like the European Rugby Championships this year. He dropped to only about 83 pounds over the course of one summer, getting that 2000s toxic swimsuit model body just in time for Labor Day. I know that was. I know.
83 pounds as a one person?
Yeah, he's 83 pounds.
That was 12 and a half pounds when I was born. I was like an eighth of his weight.
You're 12 and a half pounds when you're born?
Yeah.
You were 12 and
12 and a half pounds.
God bless your mom. Were you cesarean?
Is that like a regular?
C-section?
No. Vaginal birth.
That's stunning.
Yeah, I love my mom.
Fucking stunning.
I know.
That is
crazy.
actually... Oh, God bless your mom.
They said, here's your toddler. Here's your football player. Here's your middle linebacker.
There you go. Here's your locked in for life.
I didn't have a choice.
Oh, you're that big. Jesus Christ. Superstar. Yeah. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad I learned that about you. All right. That's a fucking huge baby.
Yeah.
He would, so going back
pounds.
to the fucking story. Liu Xun died on October 19th, 1936. His wife was by his side when he died. He was only 55 years old. So I'm pretty sure that his girlfriend, side chick, life partner, Zhu Guangqing was also there too, but his wife was definitely there. It is impossible to describe the influence that he had in modern culture, and specifically in China. He has been widely known by many different writers to be pretty much the most important author, not only in China, but basically of the whole Asian continent in the modern sense. Mao Zedong, you might have heard of this guy, once called him, quote, the chief commander of China's cultural revolution, unquote. However, he never became an official member of the CCP. He just associated with them. His writing isn't just universally loved by everybody within China and the CCP, of course. You know, it's just not a universal love. There are many of his writings are constantly criticized, specifically The Diary of a Madman. Even though it was popular, it wasn't even considered a serious work of fiction until many years after its publication. And to this day, a lot of people would criticize about how he wrote and how he complained about a lot of people in his fiction. But, writing in its own sense, like, is very, how else to describe it, as topical. Still, a major Chinese literature prize is named after him at this point, the Lu Xun Literary Prize, right? Students study his work in China as a core writer in its modern history. One theory I have is why he's so beloved is because he died over a decade before the Chinese Civil War and the Maoist Revolution, right? It's true he lived in a truly turbulent time in China. We mentioned half a dozen major movements, revolutions, wars, uprisings, etc., and we didn't even get close to the true number that occurred in the 19th and 20th century when he was alive. Because he passed away when he did, the Marxist and subsequent Maoist movements in China could revere him as a thought leader that did very little wrong. He could effectively be more useful as a symbol after his death than he was alive. Not to say he wasn't incredibly influential when he was alive, but humans be humaning, and they tend to glorify people in death. Still, I mean, there isn't somebody right now that the right is glorifying in death that we could talk about that was a podcaster and was incredibly anti-education and had his face up in the Department of Education, even though he fucking hated education. Not saying his name, but, he also praised the fact that...
Wait, are you serious?
You know this guy. I'm not going to talk about him until after the podcast because it's going to get flagged. And now we're already talking about a Chinese Maoist Marxist. So if we're going to be put on a list, at least we're going to be put on one list, not the other one, right?
Sure.
Yes.
Understood.
To spell MacGillvray is N-E-U. Okay.
No. MacGillvray. Get it right.
I've been fucking saying it wrong for years now.
That's okay. No, we haven't had a show in a while, so we haven't had a listen. We haven't had a read, so.
I'm sorry. No.
If you listen to previous episodes, you did better in the beginning with the pronunciation. I'm not. It's all good.
Oh, I'm fucking embarrassed.
Don't be embarrassed.
Oh, that sucks. You know what? No, I'm glad that we caught it an hour in.
That's fine. It was said at the beginning and the end, and now I correct it.
Good. Okay. So Howan. All right, this joke did not land because you're even backwards, Noah. Lu Xun's influence is undoubted in its impact in modern Chinese history, particularly literary history, and a topic I wanted to bring up because we simply do not hear about him as an individual in the United States of fucking America. We basically or barely get an education regarding history or literature in Asia, specifically China, at all. And that's what I find something that was one of the most difficult parts about this script. I had to do a lot of just cursory reading and like just knowledge building. And I hope I made this narrative make sense. The cultural significance due to the references and allegories were simply lost on me sometimes when reading his work. Furthermore, access to a lot of these histories and documents are still not as accessible as you'd expect. Like, his two famous works you can get online, kind of, but you have to go through Marxists.org websites, and they're not like, the most reputable in the sense that they are definitely have a major bias. They're fine. They just have, an insane bias. So speaking of websites like Marxist.org, I'm going to do some sources and plugs, but do you have any questions before we close off this script for now?
Marxist.org. Should I go visit that website if there's any other similar readings that I would like to find?
Yeah, there's plenty of it. Yeah, and I'm not gonna go I don't read political stuff, but another reason why I wanted to bring this up is they're literally we've already talked about fucking Florida getting rid of a bunch of works that they deem dangerous, and some of these works are probably not the most what would I put it? I wouldn't say dangerous. I would just put it
it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking. I wouldn't read them because I wouldn't find them interesting. But if you want to go out and read something that is a political theory based work, you should be able to do that in this country because it's freedom of the press. It's our fundamental right as an American, period, right? Like
We should be able to. We
Yeah.
should be able to learn about other cultures, other politics, and other countries. Like, it doesn't. Why not?
yeah.
It only makes you smarter as an individual.
And like, if they have good ideas and we want to bring them in this country, that's what should make America great, right? Like, that's like, oh, like we're going to be able to input, I don't know, a socialized healthcare system where we don't have to worry about people going bankrupt and dying because of it.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great. That's a good start.
It's like, it's a basic start.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not even a communist and Marxist thing. Like, hardcore conservative governments have that. But whatever. Yeah. Not ours.
Not ours.
So any other questions or anything of that sort?
No, thanks so much.
Thank you, Noah, for coming on the show and correcting me an hour in about your name. I hope you learned something.
I learned lots.
Good. So yeah, it sounds a lot less Star Wars when you go through it. But sources, I'm gonna go with. I used modern Chinese literature in the May 4th era by Merle Goldman, a couple of BBC and Guardian articles, MCLC Resource Centers, and Luke Zuhn's biography by Kirk A. Denton. I used some websites. A lot of this was at Wikipedia, unfortunately, because there's just not a lot of access to this guy's life that are in English, such as Luke Zuhn, Diary of Madmen, which I read on Marxist.org, by the way, New Youth, New Culture Movement, May 4th Movement, 12 Symbols, Qing Dynasty, 1911 Movement or Revolution, and Imperial Edict of the Abdication of the Qing Emperor. Obviously, the true story of Q, I've read that, and whatever was on that, the translation. I don't think they had a name of the translator on that. And I also want to reference the podcast Lines led by Donkeys for a lot of the info from the Taiping, Heavenly Kingdom of the Taiping Rebellion. They did a great 4-part series that was just absolutely blew my nine nuts kind of shit. So, yeah, that
Shout
is
out to them.
Luke Zuhn.
Because America.
America.